The dystopian Bible, the self was never who you think. There is an assumption so constant, so unquestioned, that it feels like the ground of existence itself. I. Before belief, before theology, before philosophy, there is the sense of being someone, a center, a thinker, a chooser, a sufferer, a story moving through time. Everything else may be doubted, but this feels certain. I am me. But symbolic language, when read psychologically, does not reinforce this certainty. It quietly challenges it. Over and over, the sacred texts speak of dying before death, losing oneself, being born again, becoming as a child. These phrases are rarely taken literally, yet their symbolic meaning points to something radical. The self we think we are is not what we think it is. The self most people refer to is a psychological construction. It is not a single entity, but a process, a continuous movement of memory, thought, identification, and narrative. It feels solid because the movement is constant, like a whirlpool that appears as an object, though it is only motion. Memory says, "This happened to me." Thought says, "This means something about me." Identification says, "This is who I am." From these threads, a story forms, a personal history, a character. This character becomes the center of experience. Everything is interpreted in relation to it. What benefits me, what threatens me, what defines me. But the character is not the awareness in which the story appears. This distinction is rarely seen. The mind confuses the narrative with the observer of the narrative. Thoughts about me are mistaken for the fact of being. The self-image replaces direct awareness. This is the birth of the psychological ego. Symbolically, many biblical themes revolve around this structure. The fall can be read as identification with the voice of thought. The exile from Eden represents the movement away from simple presence into conceptual self-consciousness. The struggle between flesh and spirit reflects the tension between reactive identity and open awareness. But when these symbols are read literally, the psychological insight is lost. The focus shifts to events, not structures of consciousness. The ego self is built from time. It exists as memory of the past and anticipation of the future. It is a story stretched across psychological time. Without reference to what was and what will be, the sense of me weakens. Notice what happens in direct presence. In moments of total attention, deep listening, or immediate perception, the narrative self recedes. There is experience, but less commentary about me having the experience. Awareness remains, but the storyteller softens. This reveals something crucial. The self we defend so fiercely is not necessary for awareness to exist. Yet most suffering revolves around protecting, improving, or justifying this self-image. We feel insulted when the story is challenged. We feel proud when it is praised. Emotions become entangled with narrative continuity. The self becomes a psychological possession. This is where dystopia becomes internal. Systems of belief and authority attach themselves to the self-structure. My religion, my salvation, my truth. Spirituality becomes another extension of identity. Even awakening can be turned into a personal achievement. The structure that suffers becomes the structure that seeks liberation. Symbolic teachings often point to a paradox. The one seeking is the very structure that must be seen through. Lose your life to find it is not moral poetry. It is a psychological instruction. The life to be lost is the narrative self, the constant identification with the story of me. This does not mean erasing functional identity. Names, roles, and memories are practical. The issue is not their existence, but the unconscious belief that they are the essence of being. When the narrative self is mistaken for the core of existence, fear becomes inevitable. Stories can be damaged, images can be shattered. The ego lives in defense because its continuity feels fragile. Awareness, however, is not fragile. It is present before any story about it. It is the space in which the sense of self appears. It does not need protection because it is not an object in experience. The confusion between self-image and awareness creates constant tension. We try to secure permanence for something inherently unstable. Thoughts change, memories fade, roles shift. The ego self is fluid. yet we treat it as fixed. This generates anxiety, a silent effort to hold the narrative together. Symbolically, dying before you die points to the ending of identification with this narrative center while the body still lives. Not physical death, but the psychological recognition that the self-image is a construct, not the observer itself. When this is seen, a subtle shift occurs. Thoughts about me are still present, but they are recognized as thoughts. Emotions still arise, but they are not owned as identity. Experience flows without being constantly filtered through personal narrative. This is not detachment from life, it is intimacy with it. Without the constant reference to, what does this mean about me? Perception becomes simpler, clearer. The dystopian structure depends on strong identification. A self that feels incomplete seeks salvation. A self that feels guilty seeks forgiveness. A self that feels threatened seeks authority. The entire psychological machinery of fear and control operates through attachment to identity. But when the self is seen as a process rather than an entity, the grip loosens. Reactions are observed instead of immediately justified. Defensive patterns become visible. Choice becomes more conscious because it is less entangled with protecting an image. The symbolic Bible is not concerned with saving a self. It is concerned with revealing its nature. The repeated theme of transformation is not about improving the character in the story, but about seeing the storyteller itself. This seeing cannot be forced. It happens through attention, not analyzing endlessly, but noticing directly how the sense of I is constructed moment by moment through thought. I appears as a word, a memory, a feeling of ownership. But what notices these? That noticing has no personal shape. It does not have a history. It is simply awareness. The self you think you are is the story. What you are is the awareness in which the story unfolds. When this distinction becomes experiential rather than conceptual, the psychological center shifts. Life continues, roles continue, but the heavy sense of being a separate narrative entity softens. This is why so many symbolic teachings speak of freedom. Not freedom for the self, but freedom from mistaking the self for the whole of being. The dystopian illusion is not imposed from outside. It begins with identification. I am this story. From that seed, fear, division, and conflict grow. Seeing the story as story does not destroy it. It puts it in context. The character continues to act, but it is no longer the ultimate reference point. And in that shift, the one you are trying to protect is revealed to have never been what you truly are.